to everyone. This is Venture Investor Economic Focus by InnMind, and today we have a very special guest, one of the most well-known and honorable investors in the field, Tim Draper. Hi, Tim.
Hey, Nelly, how are you? Thanks for
Awesome.
having me on your show.
Thank you for coming here, Tim. And of course, my first question is about what is going on the market right now. I mean, the market crash and the stock market crash, the oil prices crash, everything crashes, despite the coronavirus and everything else. So did you expect it happening?
Well, interestingly, I did expect something to happen because we had heated up so much and people had unrealistic expectations for companies, and they were valuing companies at super high prices and that kind of thing. But a time like this where I didn't expect the virus to come and change everything for us. But it's times like these we've had, I've had three before this in my professional career where we had big recessions or whatever. Each time it has a slightly different outcome. But in all cases, when all of these things sort of fall away, people start thinking for themselves, and instead of just listening to the news and just assuming that that's the way it is, they start thinking for themselves, and some of the best entrepreneurial ideas come from this. But what's almost more appealing and interesting is that all these technologies that people have been reticent to bring into their fold are all of a sudden on the table. And so this tends to be a very good time for innovation. It's a good time for venture. It can be a good time for venture capital once the venture capitalist has shored up all of their difficult companies because it's like a clean slate, and the world is going through a rethinking. And this is the kind of time where all of these things that seemed possible but maybe unlikely, or at least unlikely for a number of years, are now on the table. Now people are starting to say, oh yeah, well, hey, wait, how do we use Bitcoin in this? How do we use this smart contract? How do we use artificial intelligence now? I mean, Zoom's been around a long time. We've been using it for years, but all of a sudden, the rest of the world is now using Zoom. It's all of these new things. They're all starting to innovate and say, well, now we got a new way of looking at the world. Here is an opportunity, and so the consumer, it has wide open eyes, and that is the benefit of a time like this. The drawback is that there is always, in a recession, always a tightness of cash and a tightness of liquidity, and that can have a detrimental effect. And a lot of people lose their jobs during times like this, and that's very tough. But it's a part of the refreshing that happens to an economy. They lose their jobs, and then they go out and they say, well, I can do better than that guy did anyway, and so I'm going to start my own business. And it usually takes some time. So it goes through a period where it's sort of sliding down, and people are pulling their hair out for a while, and then slowly but surely it starts building back up in a new way that is better than the way we ran it in the past. So I suspect that healthcare, people are going to really jump right now at opportunities to use data for healthcare, and they're starting to recognize that. That's something we've been funding for a long time. You can use data for diagnostics and for therapeutics, and that can really improve healthcare outcomes. We suspect Bitcoin is going to really flourish in a time like this, because the governments are taking all this money and then they're printing super amounts of money. They're saying, we're here, $1 trillion, huge amounts of money, where they're going to put it out. Well, the government can't put $1 trillion out unless they just do a tax holiday. They can't put $1 trillion out into the economy very easily. They have to do it like through the SBA and through different organizations. And then the SBA creates, I mean, there's all sorts of friction to getting the money. So it'll be years before that money actually permeates the economy. So this is going to be a really interesting time where people say, well, wait, why don't I just use Bitcoin? I know there are only 21 million of them. We don't have to worry about whether a government is diluting their currency by printing tons of it. We can instead just use a currency we all agree on, and it's all a part of the economy, and it's already frictionless and open and transparent and global. But why bother with these other ones? So that's an exciting thing. I think smart contracts are going to come in a big way now, because as we get more into this, we're going to see that that efficiency and transparency are going to be much more important. People want to know; they want to know what's going on out there, and using Bitcoin, the blockchain, and smart contracts is going to open up sort of new ways of doing insurance, new ways of doing banking, new ways of doing real estate. All of these industries are going to be transformed. So this is kind of it's a horrible time, but then it's also a renaissance for the future. I think this could be, a horrible thing that turns out to be a great thing long term.
Tim, since you touched this point yourself, I have to ask. Recently, I've seen in a lot of media titles and also in your Twitter, it was mentioned, Tim Draper predicts Bitcoin to save the world after crisis, not government or banks. So can you please elaborate how Bitcoin will save the world after crisis?
Well, I don't know if it'll save the world, but maybe that's the headline. After the crisis, I think people will start to look and say, boy, these governments, they will look at it one way or another. Either, yes, the governments had to do the lockdown, and that's why we're all healthy and we're all moving forward. Or they'll look and they'll say, boy, these governments, they've really overreached. It's draconian to force people to stay in one place, and we might have been better off with that group immunity, or there may have been something. But anyway, the governments are all acting the exact same way, and they're acting in concert. Well, I actually think that it's possible that they're all exactly right, and that is exactly what we should be doing. But it's also possible that they are really overreaching, and then they're going to be printing all this money to try to get the economy back after they've basically tanked it. They've taken the world economy and tanked it, and now trying to get it back, they're just going to flood it with with a bunch of money. Well, that money is going to be worth less and less and less, and so people will kind of go, wait, do I want dollars or do I want Bitcoin? And they're going to generally move toward Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is it's frictionless. Right now, when you use dollars to buy retail, you're paying the banks 2.5% to 4% every time you do it. Well, that 2.5% to 4% that can stay with you, the consumer, or go to the retailer. The idea of having these governments that are tied to geographic borders, people are going to start to recognize that doesn't really make that much sense in this world. Why just because I live here do I live under this set of rules when I can go 40 minutes this way, and I live under some other set of rules, and then I go somewhere else, live under some other set of rules? I actually think that the world is now opening up, and those sets of rules, those governments, are now going to compete for you and me. They're going to compete for the great minds, the capital, the entrepreneurs, the citizens, the businesses of the world, and they're going to have to compete across border. And so they're going to have to provide better service than the people across the border, or people will leave. And that kind of thinking is going to bring us to much better governance globally. We're going to have much better governance because they're going to all have to compete with each other for us. Just the way if we only had one type of food or one type of cell phone or one type of computer, we'd be stuck with that type of computer, right? Currently, most of the world is stuck with one type of government, the one that's right there. Well, if there's competition amongst governments, particularly at the virtual level, not necessarily at the ground, on the ground, but at the virtual level, you're going to have far better service, and they're going to have to provide better service at lower costs. So taxes will inevitably have to go down and services will have to go up. And I actually think this sort of draconian, dictatorship that we're starting to go into around the world is a reaction to realizing that, hey, this isn't the way this is the roar of the dying lion. It's a great roar just before people recognize that, hey, we're global. We aren't tied to these fiefdoms. It doesn't matter whether you're from US or China or Russia or India or Europe or whatever. We're an open world, and then the geographic borders are going to mean less and less because, after all, most of what government does is insurance. It's healthcare insurance and workman's comp insurance and unemployment insurance, which is happening a lot right now. And all those insurances can be done with a smart contract and artificial intelligence in a much cheaper and better way.
Yeah, like on demand. Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to mention on-demand insurance, which is the new trend.
Yeah, on-demand insurance. And so far, those little Bitcoin insurance companies have been very small and just doing specific little things. Well, over time, that wedge will start to open, and we'll, all of our healthcare insurance and our homeowners insurance, all of that will be done on the blockchain. And I think we will all be better off. We'll get a much better deal. And when we have a claim, artificial intelligence will do a much better job than the humans have in determining whether that claim is real. Because the claim, you can have a satellite looking down and saying, yes, that hurricane did level your house. We will get you your money right away, and you can start, moving to another place right away. Or we saw the car accident, or, yes, this person did die, or whatever it is that you are insuring against. If that happened, the artificial intelligence is going to be able to do it, and do it instantly, and get you your money quickly. And that, a lot of the insurance companies, they make a habit of just like, when you have a claim, the first thing they do is they put their lawyer on you, and you end up having to fight it. That's the last thing you want to do after you've had a tragedy. So I do think that this new world is going to it's going to be a nicer, more loving, open, happy world.
Tim, I fully agree with you, and I also believe that Bitcoin will be for a long time, if not forever, with us. But investing in Bitcoin is more or less easy. If you have money, you just open the wallet and invest. Investing in the startups is much more challenging thing. So, and you're not just experienced investor, you have the dynasty of investors in your family, and your grandfather, if I am not mistaken, was the very, very first investor in Silicon Valley, correct?
Yeah, my grandfather was the first venture capitalist in the Silicon Valley. And he and my father both innovated the limited partner, general partner relationship that has driven venture capital for the last 60 years.
Oh my
Right,
God.
longer than that. Yeah, 70 years.
This is so crazy impressive. Then you are the number one person to be asked, how will the current bubble explosion on the market and the current situation influence the venture investment, venture capital market? How do you think?
So I think venture capitalists are, there were many of them. They proliferated everywhere. And everyone was, you were a venture capitalist, everyone was a venture capitalist. And now when the markets are down, only the great companies will survive this. The other companies will not. And so many of those venture capitalists are going to be desperately shoring up whatever companies they've invested in and trying to figure out which ones are going to be the winners. And I think that there's going to be a consolidation in venture capital. And I think that's going to be, that'll play into our hands, but I don't know if it's healthy. I do like the idea of a lot of competition out there for venture capital because it gives entrepreneurs a lot of opportunities for venture to get their money, and it forces venture capitalists to compete in a market system. So, I hope that this new world will continue to allow entrepreneurs to think freely, open up, innovate, drive new worlds, new ways of thinking. But usually this is a time for when the existing entrepreneurs are struggling, and then the winning concepts are adopted by all the consumers. That's sort of what happens now. We've had all this innovation and it's proliferated, and now the consumer is going to go, whoa, this is so great. I should use artificial intelligence for this. I should use Bitcoin for this. I should use smart contracts for this. I should use CRISPR. I should use new forms of computational biology. All of those things are starting to kind of happen, and I think those companies are just going to do extraordinarily well.
Mm-hmm. And how about you yourself as an investor? I mean, you have a lot of entities, funds, and conglomerates which invest in the startups. So will you increase your investment activities due to the current situation and what you have said, that a lot of new entrepreneurs will be flourishing, or you will slow down and see what happens, be more careful?
Well, the first thing I had to do, and I have been doing, is touch base with all of my existing entrepreneurs and see what positions they're in, cash to get through this, make sure they're in strong positions moving forward. At the same time, we don't want to miss some entrepreneur that comes through that might be the next unicorn, decacorn, centicorn, rhino, whatever. So we are looking for, we're still actively looking, and we haven't really changed our tune, although valuations have to come down because the expectations of the entrepreneurs were very, very high because the public markets were so high. And it seemed to make sense. Well, now it seems to make public markets are flattened and people aren't traveling, and there's no, there are lots of things that are, really slowing down the economy. If people aren't moving through the system all sort of falls on top of itself. So we really do, once this virus has been lifted, the lockdown's been lifted, we've got to get back to work super fast and back to traveling super fast. because we need that economic system to flourish. You know, if I'm a farmer and you have a house, and we aren't able to communicate with each other, and there's no deal there, then you die of starvation and I die of exposure. You know, that's to take economics to a very simple level, but we have that in a very complex, you know, 8 billion people system that are all supporting each other and getting food, clothing, shelter, transportation, communications, space flight, whatever. We have that system all put together. If we've closed down part of that system, we are going to have real trouble for a while. I mean, that is going to really bring things down. So, you know, I encourage these, you know, healthcare workers or whatever to figure out where that bell curve is just about right, because there's the possibility of much more tragedy later down the road than just the people who might have died from the virus, as horrible as it all sounds.
Yeah, same. A lot of small companies and small businesses also will die, and this fatality rate we can't forecast for the moment. Tim,
yeah, and it's a different fatality. You know, right now people are kind of going, well, it's a nice 2-week vacation, 3-week vacation, but if it lasts too long, we will start thinking, you know, oh well, you know, people are pouring oil into the ground now because it's worth less than zero. People are, you know, out sinking cruise ships. It's going to be difficult to kind of get all that, you know, incredible economy we had back up and running, and that really will require a lot of work. We have made it our practice at our group to try not to miss a beat. In fact, I get dressed up every morning, kiss my wife goodbye, and then I move into my home office. You know, my commute is like one room, and then I'm in my office for the day. And then at the end of the day, I come back, I open the door, honey, I'm home, and I have a routine that I've worked out to make it feel like I'm still working and I realize I actually have to do double time because, you know, there's so much stuff about the virus, and then there's so many issues with my entrepreneurs because of the market coming down, and then we have to continue to evaluate the entrepreneurs. So it's about it's many times as busy and very exciting. This is a very exciting time, and I feel like we can accomplish a lot here. We can potentially save many lives. We can potentially save many businesses. So and so I look and I say, well, that's my responsibility. I got to get out there. I got to do all this work.
Tim, you said you continue evaluating entrepreneurs, and I know that previously, well, before this lockdown, you did a lot of meetings with startups. You also launched your acceleration program in Silicon Valley and a lot of similar things in other countries where you spend many weeks together, face to face, hand to hand with startups because you need this feeling of collaborativeness or team spirit or whatever to evaluate them. So let's imagine lockdown will last longer. How you will be evaluating startups without touching them, without meeting with them?
Well, Zoom helps. Zoom and Skype and whatever, they help. But honestly, it's a lot tougher to fund a company if you haven't had the full energy of that entrepreneur around you, and that requires a face-to-face, one-on-one meeting. I think we'll just have to make do. We'll do our best based on a video teleconference until that happens. And it's true, we've set up Draper startup houses all over the world. And, think about this, no travel, no hotels, and entrepreneurs are scrambling. We had a discussion, that's the perfect storm. It couldn't go worse for a group that's just set up. We have, I don't know, something like 10 of these startup houses around the world. We set them all up and they're ready to go for entrepreneurs to go stay there wherever they are. We got a couple in Bangalore, we got one in Myanmar, we got one in Austin, Texas. They're all over the place for entrepreneurs to go gather. It doesn't cost much rent. It doesn't. It's a nice place to meet other entrepreneurs, to pitch venture capitalists. It has this whole great vibe about it. Well, we can't even be open for that, and that is a scramble for us. So if it lasts a long time, we're going to have to figure out different business models for those buildings. That is the problem. Commercial real estate right now is really in a tough spot everywhere, because if everybody's at home, they're not out and they're not doing the face-to-face work in their offices. So nobody. I imagine all commercial real estate is experiencing that.
We planned to launch coworkings just before what is happening, and we are so happy that we were too slow to launch them.
Well, we timed it just wrong. We got it. We got all those things out there, but it's funny. The world is different. That might have been perfect timing. I don't know. It may have been perfect timing where people are saying, okay, as soon as this thing's lifted, I'm going to get to Draper startup houses. I'm going to build my business, and I'm going to jump from one to the next and be a part of that sort of entrepreneurs club that we're going to create and all that. Or it might be like we're just doing what we can to struggle along and figure out new business models or new ways to use those buildings, or whatever. I don't have a solution yet, so I'm hoping that this thing's lifted soon enough to get people out there and being entrepreneurs again.
I hope too, but I'm sure that even if not, there will be a solution, and a lot of peers and partners worldwide will be happy to help you with making it all in the digital environment. Tim, coming back to the question about the startups, you mentioned that you talk a lot with your entrepreneurs in which you're already invested, and you try to support them to make them not give up and etc. So what advice you usually give them in these days?
But I tell the entrepreneurs, I tell them different things. Some of them I'm saying, shore up your cash, live 3 years, and hope that you come out of this thing. Some of them I'm saying double down, because you're going to be able to take market share and grow. So I do a little bit of each. Anyway, great talking with you, Nelly. I hope this worked out, and send me a link.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you for your time.
Okay, bye-bye.